Oh, Reconstruction was nasty in North
Yeah.
Carolina. I actually think that Reconstruction in North Carolina was what led to Jim Crow here. I feel like if things had been a little less where they wanted to punish Southerners, where they were trying to, do these crazy things like take away property and all of this stuff. I feel like if that hadn't have happened, that the whole Jim Crow era probably would have been a lot less um, violent and terrible.
Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 397. I'm talking to Cassie Clark, who is has a show called Where the Dogwood Blooms. She loves her state. She loves North Carolina. We're going to talk about all these things in North Carolina history that she loves to talk about. I love this kind of dedication to people where she's lived in the West and the East, and there's a very unique history there that makes North Carolina special. So, how are you, Cassie?
I'm excellent. How are you?
Yeah, one thing is, since it's the first day of December, it still hasn't gotten that cold there, has it?
Not where I'm at. It
Yeah.
actually just started getting cold over the past day or two, but up until here, recently, it was t-shirt weather.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're wearing looks like a pretty warm sweater now too. We got some cool days here, but we'll see what happens with. So I got to tell you, what can you tell me about North Carolina? At least, I guess we'll start with Roanoke Island.
So a lot of people always point to Jamestown when they talk about the first settlement in America, and that's not true. The very first American settlement occurred in North Carolina at Roanoke. And Roanoke was where the very first American was born, Virginia Dare. And it's actually really sad story. This colony gets set up and wars break out in England. And so getting help from England, getting supplies just kind of stopped. And so these people, they just disappeared. And when they went back to check on them, finally, there was one word carved in a tree, and it was Croatoan. And so there's all of these theories about what happened to the people of the Roanoke colony. Some people say that, of course they starved or they died off through fighting with the Native Americans. And then there are other people who believe that they integrated into the Native American societies that were nearby. And there's actually a little evidence that supports that because there are North Carolina tribes that have very English surnames.
Oh wow, would it be possible to do any genetic testing or anything like that?
So I don't know if that had because of over the years with, all of the different you know, people, marrying, Native Americans and things like that. I don't know if it would be possible to trace them all the way back to the original Roanoke colony, but hopefully one day.
Yeah, Roanoke Island was 1585, and Sir Walter Raleigh was involved with that. And of course, he's of course important because that's why you named your capital Raleigh. So
That's right. And it's actually his story is very sad. He was, the queen's favorite, and he ended up being used as a scapegoat and murdered by the following king.
yeah, this was a very turbulent time for England. Really, a turbulent time all the way up. With the all the way up to the Glorious Revolution, really. And I think that's why, at least in part, why so many people were leaving. So no idea what happened. Yeah. Virginia Dare was the first person of European descent born in America. How many were living at Roanoke Island?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I want to say that there were two different groups who were brought in to Roanoke. Let's see. Um, I want to say that it was also evacuated at one point. And if I remember correctly, that it was less than 150 colonists who were brought over.
Yeah, and Roanoke Island is where now?
So it is actually in the Outer Banks. And so you can go to the Outer Banks to Roanoke and you can see where the original fort was.
Okay, that's wild. Yeah, that'd be near Nag's Head or something like that.
Right.
Also, not too far from where another famous event in North Carolina took place. Right, the first flight.
Oh, me and Ohio go at each other over this. I cannot stand when they're like, "Oh, Ohio is the birth of aviation." Really? Did it take place there? Because it actually took place in North Carolina, and yeah, it took place in the Outer Banks too.
Yeah, well, that's where it happened. Yeah, although the
Yeah.
Wright brothers were from Ohio, but yes, they.
One of them was actually from Indiana. Does Indiana get credit too?
I don't believe Indiana tries to claim credit. They
Okay.
had a bicycle shop, and and of course, Ohio can still claim John Glenn and Neil Armstrong. So
That's true.
yeah,
And
that
they're
was.
more than welcome to them. Just leave my first in flight alone.
Yeah, I remember often on the license plates it would say first in flight. Also too, I remember also the license plate would sometimes say first in freedom. Exactly does that mean?
So, North Carolina was the first state who empowered our delegates to approve oh, was it I want to say it was the Declaration of Independence. And so we consider ourselves to be the first in freedom.
Okay, yeah. So when would the next people come to North Carolina after the Roanoke Island colony?
So I couldn't tell you a year, but the way that North Carolina was settled is actually really interesting. So after Roanoke Island, they just kind of abandoned North Carolina, and Jamestown ended up being settled next. And then below us, Charleston was settled. And so our very first settlers, permanent settlers in North Carolina, actually didn't come from other countries like many of the other colonies. They actually came from established colonies. So Virginians started moving further south. And they were some of the first, and they settled up around the Great Dismal Swamp and into the Outer Banks. And then in Charleston, they started pushing north and settling southeastern North Carolina.
Okay, so like near Wilmington and places like that.
Right. Brunswick Town was actually before Wilmington. Sadly, it's no longer there. It's a ghost town, but that's another place that you can actually go visit. And there's the walls of the original church there. And back then they buried like the most important people in the colonies. They buried them under the like literally beneath your floorboards. And so whenever you walk into the walls of this church, you're actually walking into a grave because inside there are still people buried in there.
Yeah, how did New Bern end up becoming the first cap or one of the early capitals?
So I don't know the answer to that, but New Bern has a really interesting history. When people think about North Carolina, everybody always assumes that we're English or we are African American and or Native American, and they forget about all the other people who helped, settle the state of North Carolina. And New Bern was actually originally a Swiss settlement. And so I am descended from some of the original settlers of New Bern.
Which would make sense considering the name of the city. I mean, they were naming all of these towns and then there's all of these. America has a lot of towns that are named New something. It's really, of course, the most famous being New York, but also.
Wilmington was originally New Liverpool. And so it was named after Liverpool, England. And apparently the street layouts are very similar to that of Liverpool, England.
That's wild. I didn't know that. It's funny how these people, they'll come from one city and they'll kind of bring their own unique perspective to the next city, And so then what happened with North Carolina? So not really much happened in North. So what then happened? About the time that you talked about the delegates. What can you tell us about the Revolutionary War?
So North Carolina was kind of a powerhouse in the Revolutionary War and were often overlooked, but a lot of really important things about the Revolutionary War happened here in North Carolina. We had the Edenton Tea Party, and though that wasn't about dumping tea into the ocean, it was a group of women here in North Carolina took the first political stand for a group of women, and they basically said that they're not going to drink tea anymore because of the taxes that were put on tea. And we're also, like you said earlier, we're considered the first in freedom. And we had a huge problem here in that a lot of our early settlers were from Scotland, and the Scottish were very much so loyal to the crown. And so here in North Carolina, there was a lot of fighting between the loyalists and the patriots. And we didn't, after the war was over, we did a really good job of those two groups making peace with one another. There are actually monuments to the loyalists who fought in the Revolutionary War. I want to say that a great one is at, give me a second, let me see if I can remember the name of it. There's a battlefield in Pender County. What is the name of that?
Pender County, yeah.
Oh, Morse Creek. There is one in Morse Creek Battlefield.
Morse Creek, as in Morse code. So,
well, it's actually Moore as in a last name, Morse Creek.
Oh, Morse Creek. Okay. Well, I thought Moore apostrophe s. Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yep.
I also thought you might have been saying Morris, but you just wanted to clarify that. So, yeah, that's very interesting. I know there was also Kings Mountain.
There was also Kings Mountain. So Kings Mountain is a really interesting story. Hillbillies are often overlooked. And if you are a hillbilly or you are descended from hillbillies, we like to pass these stories down. So in Kings Mountain, you had the Over Mountain men climb out of the hills and really put a smack down on the British. And so it's one of my favorite battles in the Revolutionary War that took place. It actually happened in South Carolina, but a lot of the Over Mountain men came from Western North Carolina, Tennessee, and Southwestern Virginia.
Yeah, that's still a very and those are the highest mountains on the East Coast, really, too, because you all have Mount Mitchell, which is the highest mountain east of the Mississippi. So
that's right.
I've learned it myself too. No matter wherever you go, don't mess with the mountain people. It's just
never smart. And people don't seem to really understand our kind of attitude is something that has been developed over generations. First of all, most of us are Scots Irish or have a Scots Irish connection. And the Scots Irish were very fiercely independent. They didn't want to be messed with. They, and so you hear about hillbillies showing up in the driveway to meet, strangers with a shotgun. Well, I mean, we get it natural. We got it very honest.
Yeah, I like to think it's coming from the fact that you're always having to walk up or walk down instead of just walking on flat land. I mean, imagine just what it would do to you if you were always walking up and down steps in your house.
Been there, done that. I tell people that I don't know what it is about living in Western North Carolina, but the vast majority of my relatives from there, they live up until their late 90s. So there's a magic in those mountains. I don't know if it's the water or the air or if it's the exercise that you get on a daily basis, because it is exercise to get wherever you're going to go. Whatever it is, there's something in Western North Carolina that makes you live just a little bit longer.
And my grandfather used to cut about an acre of grass with a push mower on a hillside that was like this. It's I do wonder if that's just part of what it is. Because it's that way. I've been to the Caucasus Mountains. I've been to it's everywhere that way. But yeah, maybe it just instills a work ethic because you have to fight. You're always fighting nature because it's. Whether it be slips but yes.
Or black bear, the black bear, they're everywhere, The
black bears, the panthers, the mountain lions, and the snakes, yeah. So anything else happened during the Revolutionary War? It's of course.
So much happened during the Revolutionary War, but like I said, most of what sticks out to me is the fact that we were extremely pitted against each other here in North Carolina, maybe more than anywhere else. And yet, shortly after the war, it was like all was forgiven and we were all Americans. And I've always thought that that was just absolutely fascinating, especially since, when people started wanting to tear down Confederate monuments and these kinds of things, they were like, well, the losers shouldn't have monuments here, da 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 da. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, in the state of North Carolina, we have monuments to our losers. We have monuments to the loyalists. Like, it's really just about embracing all of the different opinions and ideas and those who lived here. And so I think that that's beautiful that we were able to come back together and be one country and one state and move forward. I wish that you saw more of that today.
Yeah. Wasn't also the Outer Banks somewhat of a home for pirates, like Blackbeard and
Somewhat, it was
yeah,
totally a home for pirates. A lot of so the Cape Fear was really hard to navigate. And so pirates loved the coast of North Carolina because they were really good navigators, and it was easy for them to get away from, the military patrols and that kind of thing that were going on trying to prevent piracy on our coast. And Blackbeard, he called Bath, North Carolina home. And so he actually asked for a pardon up there. And I've told about this story hundreds of times, but he got a pardon. And of course, he loved piracy too much. He wasn't actually going to stop being a pirate, but he gets this pardon. And Spotswood, Governor Spotswood from Virginia, he was ticked off and he did not like North Carolinians. He thought we were backwards. He actually said some pretty nasty things about the state or the colony of North Carolina. And he decided that the piracy was going to end. And so he sends his men into the waters of North Carolina with the goal of capturing Blackbeard, which they did. Blackbeard died during battle. They whacked off his head, put it on the stern of their ship, brought it back to Williamsburg, and they ended up hanging it on a pike at, I want to think it was in Hampton Roads. And so in order to do this, Virginia literally invaded North Carolina. And nobody ever talks about it that way, but that's literally what happened. Is the governor of Virginia decided, we're going to invade North Carolina and we're going to get Blackbeard, and that's what they did. And a lot of people forget about, the gentleman pirate. The gentleman pirate he actually was a pirate alongside Blackbeard, and he was one of the only pirates who bought his own ship, funded his own crew, because he was rich. He was a plantation owner, and I want to say Barbados. I hope I didn't get that right. And the big battle where he ended up being captured happened in the water between what is today Southport and Bald Head Island. And he was captured and taken to Charleston. And in Charleston, he was hung. But yeah, there were many other pirates that ended up, hanging around the coast of North Carolina in that golden age of piracy.
Yeah, well, Charleston, of course, was significant because it was a natural harbor, so that's why some of these places just had natural harbors. Yeah, Southport. Southport is kind of at that little corner down south of Wilmington.
Right. And Charleston really had a nasty taste in their mouth because pirates blockaded them and basically held them for ransom. And so they were pretty ticked off, and they showed no mercy whenever they went to battle with the pirates.
There were a lot of another forgotten chapter of the Revolutionary War. There were a lot of privateers, and that wasn't always just private, like small private. Almost, you were one ship, and you were kind of your own navy, and the line between the privateer and the pirate wasn't necessarily clear.
Well, that really started with England. England was funding privateers to go out and attack the Spanish, and that was long before the Revolutionary War. And so they
Yeah.
really started this culture of piracy themselves, and it just carried on much longer after they would want it to.
Sir Francis Drake, yes, exactly. It was a, and from what I've heard too, the pirates actually, life on the sea was hard no matter what you were doing, but you were actually treated better on a pirate ship than you were on a British Navy ship.
Yeah, there was a lot of equality. People don't realize that there were, and don't get me wrong, I mean, a lot of these pirates treated their men terribly, but there were black pirates, there were female pirates. And
Yes.
so anybody who was willing to put in the work on the pirate ship, they were taken in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like Blackbeard, he didn't make it till 40. A lot of them didn't live very long. I think, just the fact that you were away, things like scurvy, other things, and there was just so much more disease back then. Not to mention shipwrecks, and we had no radios at the time, so a ship would go out and it wouldn't come back, and you would have no idea what happened to it.
Yep. Well, there is a part of the coast of North Carolina that is called the Atlantic, the graveyard of the Atlantic. And when you hear about ships going missing here on the coast of North Carolina, that's what they're talking about. And you can actually go scuba diving down there and you can see a lot of these old shipwrecks.
Oh yeah, and none of these ships were particularly big either. They were nothing compared to something like Carnival Cruise Lines or something like that. There's just the graveyard of the Atlantic on the Outer Banks. Yeah, lots. Sometimes just really turbulent sea. Also, hurricanes and stuff like that. And of course, we don't have the records. Also, I got to bring up the Revolutionary War. Of course, in 1767, I guess there's some dispute as to whether or not he was born in North Carolina or South Carolina. But I think what I'm talking about.
Hold on. Can you say that again?
I said born in 1767, and there's some dispute as to whether or not he was born in North or South Carolina. Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson. That there's also Andrew Jackson. Yes, that's one. But there's also Abraham Lincoln. Some people believe that Abraham Lincoln was born in the state of North Carolina. And there's actually a really compelling story behind it.
Yeah.
His mother was she was single. She was working for, someone, and supposedly she got pregnant and she had her baby. And it wasn't until she met Lincoln's father, Lincoln, that she got married. And I guess Mr. Lincoln, adopted Abraham, and they left to go to Tennessee. And so it's there's some pretty compelling evidence that backs it up. I feel like also with South Carolina's always like, no, this actually happened in our state.
Yeah, that's pretty well. I never heard that theory about Lincoln, but with record keeping just wasn't what it was back then. So, and if you'd want to, and of course you didn't necessarily want people to know, oh, I had a baby out of wedlock. So, yeah.
And borders change too. So when you're talking about Jackson, there was actually a very long border dispute between North and South Carolina. I would have to look again and see where exactly Jackson was born. But at the time, it could have been that was part of the area that was disputed, and North Carolinians may have just been like, you know what, this is our land, and he was born here.
I know they call it the Waxhaw settlement. I've heard too that apparently he was 9 years old and they would have these public readers, and he actually read the Declaration of Independence to the town.
That is awesome. I hadn't heard that.
I don't know maybe I'm wrong about that, but he and of course, he was orphaned young and ended up in the military and was the only president we've had who was a prisoner of war.
So if you're from Western North Carolina, Jackson kind of leaves a nasty taste in your mouth. So
why?
Well, so my mama was from Swain County. Swain County actually borders Cherokee. And so she had Native American cousins. And so I grew up on the stories of the Indian removal in 1838, the Trail of Tears.
Yep.
I, heard all about how the Cherokee ended up remaining in the state of North Carolina. And so it's hard not to look back at Jackson as a controversial figure who did some really awful things to our people.
Okay, I didn't. Yeah, I'm certainly aware of the Trail of Tears. I didn't realize that. So I guess the people in Western North Carolina got along fairly well with the Cherokee, or
Yes and no. So I feel like those who actually were in constant contact with the Cherokee, they definitely did. My mama used to tell stories about, her mama learned how to do certain things from, the Native Americans who live nearby, whether that be, healing or, beekeeping, just different little things that she learned from the Native Americans. And they seem to have gotten along really, really well if they lived right nearby one another. But of course, then there are also stories about when the 1838 Indian Removal Act happened. There were people, from Mecklenburg County and other areas who ended up moving into Western North Carolina to try to remove the Cherokee from their homelands. And so I think that those who lived nearby, they built relationships and things like that with their neighbors. And then those who were further away and less in contact and knew less about the culture, I think that they were, people of their time who were just wanting to squash it.
yeah, I really do wonder. I've often wondered, why did some groups get along well and some didn't? I often think sometimes, and I like to think sometimes it was maybe because they couldn't convert them.
I believe that that's probably true. But the really sad thing about the Cherokee of Western North Carolina is that they had converted. They were Christian. Most of them considered themselves, not all of them were Christian, but some of them were. They considered themselves North Carolinians and Americans. Some of them fought right alongside us. I actually did a post on X recently talking about June Luska, and June Luska was a Cherokee warrior. He was from, I want to say, Jackson County, North Carolina. He fought alongside Andrew Jackson. I can't remember which battle it was, but as story goes, he saved Andrew Jackson's life. And when the Indian Removal Act started taking place, he actually met Andrew Jackson again, and he told him, basically, I saved your life, and look what's happening. And Andrew Jackson basically told him, there's nothing I can do for you. And so Junaluska was sent on the Trail of Tears out to Oklahoma. And there was a man named William Holland Thomas he was kind of like the white chief of the Cherokee. He was kind of adopted into the Cherokee, and he was the one who helped establish the Qualla boundary in Western North Carolina, which is the native lands. And he sent letters to our North Carolina General Assembly, and he was like, "Hey, Junaluska fought for us. He has been on our side. Like, we need to bring him home." And that actually made a difference. The North Carolina General Assembly ended up bringing Junaluska home and giving him land grants. And so he got to live out the rest of his life in North Carolina.
That's a wild, yeah, that's a wild story. North Carolina, I don't think ever really had an established religion, did they? I mean, it wasn't like Massachusetts and
No.
Connecticut where it was the Puritans and
No, actually, my husband and I had a discussion about this not so long ago. He grew up Presbyterian and I grew up Baptist. And when you look back at the history of North Carolina, you can see that as the people start moving in, you see Presbyterians, you see Baptists, you see all these different religion never really was a point of contention in North Carolina, even back in colonial times. And as a matter of fact, North Carolinians have always been extremely rebellious, even against religion a little bit. We've always been the kind of people where don't tell me what to do. And so people in North Carolina tend to be very religious. Like I believe in God very much. Um, but I'm also a little superstitious because, I mean, I grew up in Western North Carolina and Southeastern North Carolina. Someone who was very Puritan would never understand the kind of religious culture that has sprung up in the state of North Carolina. But I think it's beautiful.
Well, of course, I believe Billy Graham was also from North Carolina, right?
Absolutely. Billy Graham was 100% from North Carolina. And there's some great stories about him. There's actually a joke that um, Billy Graham walks out and he's getting ready to get in a limo and he looks at the guy who's driving the limo and he tells him, "Hey, I want to drive the limo. Can I drive the limo?" And the limo driver's like, "Sure." And so the limo driver climbs into the back and Billy Graham is driving the limo and he is speeding. And so he gets pulled over by a police officer and the police officer gets out and he has, he's talking to Billy Graham and he walks back to his car and he radios in and he's like, "Hey, I know that we're supposed to give tickets to everyone who's speeding, but I think that we may want to let this guy go." And the person who responds is like, "What are you talking about?" And the officer is like, "I'm pretty sure that I just pulled over God." And they're like, "What?" And they're like, "It's Billy Graham driving a limo. Who else could be in the back?"
I've heard a variation on that joke that apparently the Pope was driving a limo and said, "I don't know who's in the back, but the Pope's his chauffeur."
Yeah, well, in the state of North Carolina, the joke is always with Billy Graham because,
Yeah.
Billy Graham's famous around here.
Oh, yes, he is. Yeah, it's yeah, famous North people from North Carolina. It's pretty well. North Carolina was also the 12th to ratify the Constitution. What do you think was their reason for holding out? Do you think they were just more independent, or?
So, the biggest problem with us signing the Constitution was the fact that there was not a Bill of Rights. And so we basically said, until you add a Bill of Rights, we are not signing this. We are not going to become part of the United States. And so they really forced that. And because of, I want to say there was another state who agreed with us, but because of North Carolina, you can be grateful to us for having a Bill of Rights because we were not going to sign on without it.
Well, Rhode Island was 13th, so that's. I think they were very, and Rhode Island very much had that rogue spirit there. Basically, they were just non-religious people who got kicked out of Connecticut, and Massachusetts. So
Right.
yeah, but those were also the first states that had no established religion. It was Rhode Island, Pennsylvania. Yeah, it's so wild. I find it interesting. You have had all these land disputes with. You were invaded by Virginia, and you have all these land disputes with South Carolina. So how are the relationships now? Is it still?
We joke that we are a valley of humility between two mountains of conceit. That's kind of how North Carolina looks at Virginia and South Carolina. Um, but it wasn't just those two. With Tennessee, Tennessee, at least East Tennessee, technically is Western North Carolina. And we ended up ceding them property. And I can't remember the exact reason for it. I can't remember if it was to pay war debts or what it was, but we ended up giving a large portion of property to Tennessee. And so there's actually a lot of cultural mix over and blend between East Tennessee and Western North Carolina. It's actually really interesting.
Well, a
And that's
lot of
why.
the colonies, tried to claim more land than they initially had because, it was the same way with Virginia and Kentucky.
Mhm.
And I think they just claimed all the way to the Mississippi River. So,
Well, so with North Carolina, the original colony, um, it was one colony. It was Carolina,
Yeah.
and it encompassed, oh gosh, I want to say that it was everything below Virginia, running all the way to I want to say the top portion of Florida, and then going all the way out, like it just extended across the country until things were broke up. And North and South Carolina, we were so different that it didn't make sense to leave us as one colony. I mean, because of course, before this, uh, Georgia splits off, and they're splitting off the land as you go. But with North and South Carolina, we were too different. Our economics were different. Our people were different. Like, just everything was different, and so they split us in half. And then North Carolina remained pretty large because of that portion of Tennessee. And then it was much later that we ceded that off to Tennessee. But I always joke and tell Tennessee that they're really just Western North Carolina.
What were some of the differences? Was it maybe small farms versus plantations, or what?
Yeah, so in North Carolina at the time, our economy was very much led by the timber industry, naval stores. It was small, a lot of smaller farms here. I'm not saying we didn't have plantations, we did, and we had some very large ones, particularly in southeastern North Carolina and in the coastal Piedmont. We grew rice. Let's see. I want to say rice was a huge crop in southeastern North Carolina. Then there was, tobacco. Tobacco was a huge thing here in North Carolina. It was for a really long time.
Oh,
But
yes.
smaller farms, at least when you look at the whole state, were more common. Whereas in South Carolina, very large cotton plantations were kind of the way of life. And so there were a lot of different disagreements on, you know, what was more important, and just little things. I mean, I actually did a video about all of the reasons that we split, but it actually makes sense. Our culture is extremely different. And so, it makes sense that we became North and South Carolina.
Yeah, I never imagined this, but now it's all making sense. And of course, probably Virginia was also very much a large plantation economy.
Mhm.
And you knew the other thing too is when I think of Virginia history, I think of all these families. I think of the Lees, the Randolphs, Jefferson, Washington, and of course they were all somewhat connected. But I can't think of any famous family from North Carolina,
Oh, of course you can.
or maybe
Well,
they.
maybe not from back then, but I
Yeah.
mean, we have, the Duke family.
Oh
Um,
yes. Oh gosh.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we have,
Later era. Yeah, but definitely
yeah,
the Dukes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
right.
The college. Yes.
And
Yeah.
you also have to remember, because North Carolina was settled by Virginians and South Carolinians, we have those same families here. So, I am very distant cousins to the Lee family. I'm very
Oh yeah.
distant cousins to the Warner family. Now, the Warner family were the ancestors to the Washingtons and the Lees.
Yeah.
And so, here in the state of North Carolina, you're going to find a lot of descendants like that whose families ended up trickling into the state of North Carolina. And then, of course, you're going to find the same thing when you're talking about people who left Charleston and ended up settling in southeastern North Carolina. You're going to find, the Moore family and stuff like that. Mhm.
Yeah. That I guess that brings up the inevitable question: Does North Carolina also try to claim Hazard County?
Uh,
I mean, with
you're
the Dukes.
with the Dukes.
Yeah.
Um, no, but I would definitely say that it was heavily inspired by North Carolina when you're talking about, somebody running moonshine.
Yes.
Wilkes County, Swain County, Haywood County, a lot of Western North Carolina families, they made ends meet by making moonshine. And then, of course, that moonshine had to be ran to sell it. And so I have many people in my family who have been moonshiners, and actually all across the state. I have family who were into moonshine and who ran moonshine.
I have ancestors as well. That it goes way back, but they were
Yep.
there. It was Well, that's what you did. You couldn't keep your corn. You couldn't store it, so you had to do something with it, or it would just rot. So you make it into liquor, and it'll last 6 months. It made
It was
sense. Yeah.
it was I mean, I think it's also cultural and part of our heritage that we made moonshine. It's what we did, and so when they outlawed it, I think they were just asking for trouble. It's one of those things that, I'm not big on breaking the law, but when it comes to moonshine, I'm totally okay with drinking my moonshine. Anybody who hangs out on my X account enough knows that I get a lot of moonshine and I drink it. I have no shame in it whatsoever. But it's been passed down for generations, and so I feel like it's something that we should be keeping alive. And I also feel like if you're paying taxes on moonshine, that ain't moonshine. You're being duped.
Yeah, that's something that always gets passed down from, generation to generation as recipes. It's truly one of those things that you learn from mom or whatever. Yeah. So what happened? Going up to the Civil War. What was that? Because Fort Sumter happened, and then Virginia leaves, Tennessee leaves, South Carolina leaves, and then North Carolina's just kind of like, well, what choice do we have?
So North Carolina was, if not the last to secede, almost the last to secede. And the reason for that is because the way that North Carolina is laid out, um, we have three different regions, and not all of the regions could support plantation, farming. And so Western North Carolinians did not want to go to war. And then we also had a population of Amish. eh, Well, I don't know if they were Amish Quakers. We had a population of Quakers, and they were a very large population. I'm actually descended from some of those too, and they lived in the Uaries. And so they flat out did not want to go to war because of their religious beliefs. And so the state was very conflicted about whether to secede and join the Confederacy or not. And really, what turned that around and got us to leave the Union and join the Confederacy was when Lincoln tried to call troops up out of North Carolina and send them to squash the rebellion at Fort Sumter. Because of the way that North Carolina was settled, you're talking about calling up men to fight against their own relatives, their cousins, and things like that. And so we did actually leave to go into the Confederacy, but and also we ended up supplying a massive amount of men into the war effort. Um, but because so many people really didn't want to fight that war, there was a lot of, abandonment and things like that going on. There's some really sad stories about the way that men who didn't want to fight in that war were treated. There was a lot of men who were murdered and stuff like that. And so a great story if anybody is interested. Read Cold Mountain. The story about Groomstown, that's something that I grew up on. Is they tracked down these deserters and they ended up murdering them in Haywood County, and um, even to this day, Groomstown is popular back where I'm from. And I mean that's been how long ago? The 1860s, and so still that's a song that is near and dear to a lot of people in Haywood County because they grew up on that story too.
With all the Quakers, was there a lot of anti-slavery activity going on? Because the Quakers were absolutely opposed to slavery.
Yes, there was. So there's a story that's really personal to me. So there was not a lot. Most of my family lived in poverty, but my mama is actually descended from some of the more affluent people in the Outer Banks and southeastern North Carolina. And so she is descended from a family who were slave owners. They had a very large plantation, and one of the daughters ended up getting pregnant by a slave. And when you hear stories about from back then, you would think that, either the child was taken from her and put into slavery, or that she would have been, just completely thrown out of the family. What actually happened was is her family helped her escape to Winston-Salem, and then from Winston-Salem, they got her out and into, I want to say it was Ohio, and she was able to raise her child. And we're talking about in the pretty early 1800s. I want to say this happened in like the 1840s, um, maybe 1830s. And she even inherited still from her daddy. It wasn't a whole lot, but she did inherit. And so they never forgot about her, and they continued to try to help support her. Um, but yeah, the Underground Railroad was a definite thing here in North Carolina, and it was actually North Carolina citizens who were helping people escape.
So what happened in this after the Civil War?
Oh, Reconstruction. Reconstruction was nasty in North
Yeah.
Carolina. I actually think that Reconstruction in North Carolina was what led to Jim Crow here. I feel like if things had been a little less where they wanted to punish Southerners, where they were trying to, do these crazy things like take away property and all of this stuff. I feel like if that hadn't have happened, that the whole Jim Crow era probably would have been a lot less um, violent and terrible.
I wonder about that too. If it's just this whole you have this whole forced revenge, and it's just it almost becomes a large scale Hatfield McCoy situation. Uh,
Hmm.
you talked about the Duke family. Did they make money in oil? I believe, or they were that was one thing they made money. Well, they
So,
had several interests though. But I know there's Duke Oil and there's other things.
if I remember correctly, it was tobacco that
Yeah,
the Duke that made the Duke family famous. And I also want to say that they weren't originally from here. I want to say that they were from like New Jersey. Um, and so, of course, they're the ones who established, Duke University, which is still going strong. And they've had a major influence here in North Carolina. But they're not the only families who were from other places who found North Carolina to be just absolutely beautiful and charming, and who ended up investing here in our state. The Rockefellers are one. They ended up they purchased property for hunting in the Sandhills. And there's actually now a brand new, well, it's been around for a few years. There's a state park that was actually Rockefeller land that you can go see. I want to say that it is in like Spring Lake. And then, of course, there was the Vanderbilts. They built the Biltmore Estate in Western North Carolina. And
yeah.
I'm sure there are others, but yeah, there have been a lot of predominant families who have come along and done different things here in North Carolina that ended up bettering our state.
Yeah, Asheville seems to have its own character all by itself too. I know because that's where the
Uh,
Vanderbilt house is. You seem rather
I have a little bit of an attitude about Asheville because I grew up in Canton. Canton is not very far from Asheville. And Asheville now has so many people who aren't actually from the city who live there. And the culture of the natives is actually dying really quickly there. So, where it used to be a bunch of people playing banjo and clogging, and there were these big, huge, massive, flea markets and farmers markets, all of that has kind of become like this yuppie central kind of place. And most people I feel like who are from Western North Carolina, we kind of avoid it. Like we don't go there unless there's something very specific we need to do. But yeah, Asheville hurts my heart.
it's pretty expensive too, from what I hear.
Incredibly expensive, and that's not just Asheville, that is all of Western North Carolina at this point. It's actually kinda heartbreaking to think that, my family have been there since it was very first settled, and, I have relatives who are Cherokee, and so they've been there forever, and I can't even afford a piece of property there to go home whenever I want, so
That's always a little disheartening. It's so they always pay, and it seems like also some cases you have people where they just get where their property taxes go up so much they can't stay there either. It's
Yeah. And like I said earlier, NAFTA didn't help with any of that. Whenever the, companies and things started fleeing to go to other places, it really left Western North Carolina in a bind. And so, the natives either had to flee or they had to live in poverty.
yeah, there wasn't any coal mining or anything like that down there, was there?
No, there was mica mining,
Okay.
but for the most part, Western North Carolina, we focused on timber. And so, the logging industry was very big out there, as was anything that required water. Um, my mama worked at Inca. Inca, they did, I want to say it was nylon that they produced. And so things like that were really big. Paper mills and, lumber and that kind of stuff was what was going on in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, there's timbering. There's timbering all over the mountains because there's just a lot of trees. Yeah, I don't know if you ever had anything like this happen down there, but I believe it was in Maine. They had the Pine Tree Rebellion, and this was part of the Revolutionary War. They wanted to regulate and tax cutting down pine trees,
Oh,
and
wow.
and the colonists got upset about that and said, no, we're not going to. Yeah,
I
that
don't
was
know.
up.
I'll have to look
That was
that one
that was
up.
up in New England though. But yeah, I don't know if anything like that happened in North Carolina, but that definitely happened up there because they got a lot of pine trees. They got a lot of trees up there too. So
I would imagine not, because the longleaf pines here were amazing, not only for producing lumber, but for all of the things that they needed, the tar and the turpentine that they
yeah,
needed for shipbuilding. And so England needed that desperately. And so, we were double time, especially in southeastern North Carolina and the coastal Piedmont, cutting down our longleaf pines to produce, the naval stores that then the English would use to fund their wars.
but I suppose also though, considering just how far away that was from the ocean, how hard would it have been for the English to, stick their nose into your business anyway? I mean, it's a lot further away from the ocean than New Hampshire or Maine is.
Right.
I mean, you're talking what probably at the time. I mean, to go from say Ocracoke to Asheville in the 1780s was probably what 6 days or at least.
Well, now back then, Western North Carolina would have been a complete and total frontier. Um, when I talk about the naval stores and things that were going on and during that period, when we're talking about, Revolutionary War, you're talking about really southeastern North Carolina. You're
Okay.
talking about, closer to the Outer Banks. That area would have been doing that. Yeah, because Western North Carolina was really just getting really good and settled around the time that, the Revolutionary War took place.
Yeah. So yeah. So then just we moved on to the the move. Well, we pretty much moved out of the 1800s. And then of course you talk about moonshining and cars. I mean,
NASCAR.
NASCAR was basically born in the Carolinas. I mean,
Yeah,
the NASCAR Hall of Fame is in Charlotte. So many people from Dale Earnhardt is from North Carolina. The
that's
Pettys are
right.
from North Carolina. I mean, who
Race
else?
hell, praise Dale.
Who?
I said race hell, praise Dale.
Yeah,
Yeah, North Carolina really, because of moonshine and because of, people running moonshine, we were front runners for the creation of NASCAR. And I mean, like you said, we have some incredible racing families that came from here. It's really sad that so many of our tracks closed, and to see NASCAR kind of take a route that literally goes against the very people who created it and fostered it and made it popular. Um, but yeah, I would say that NASCAR definitely owes a huge gratitude to the state of North Carolina.
oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Some of this I know. I think yeah. There's several tracks I can think of: Rockingham,
Hmm.
North Wilkesboro.
Yeah. I would love to see them make a comeback. It really breaks my heart that they're gone because I didn't get to go. I was poor when, like, just totally poverty stricken when these were, going on when I was little. And so then they closed them down, and now I'm like, do I really want to go see them now that I know that, they hate the rednecks and the hillbillies that created it. So um but yeah, North Carolina was big into the creation of NASCAR.
Oh yeah, it definitely was. I mean, yeah, there's been a lot. I guess if I was ever going to go anywhere, I'd probably want to go to Darlington. That's not North Carolina, but
Yeah.
that is certainly the old school track. It's
I would definitely I would go to Darlington, but I think Rockingham is the one that I always wanted to go to. And now you can't go anymore. It's really sad.
what do they do? What do they do with those tracks? They just, I mean, that's a lot of real estate that's just sitting there empty, not being used.
Yep. I know that there was something going on where they're trying to figure out turning the Wilkesboro track into something useful for the people in Wilkesboro. Now, if they've decided anything, I have no idea. But you asked about, you know, race car drivers from North Carolina. You forgot about Harry Gant.
Well, I knew there were lots of them. Yeah, Harry Gant.
So many are from North Carolina. And, I would have to let me look it up
But
real quick. I
arguably,
think.
arguably, the two biggest names in the history of NASCAR are Petty and Earnhardt. Yeah,
Oh yeah, and I love them both. One is the king and one is the intimidator, and they just made NASCAR amazing. Yeah.
yeah. I think Richard was a great ambassador of the sport. Not everybody loved Earnhardt, I remember, but yeah,
I think North Carolina did.
yeah,
I think he embodied the North Carolina spirit very well. But yeah, when I was little, I want to say the very first race car driver that I was a fan of was Richard Petty. And then it was Davy Allison. And Davy Allison, because I was little, and he very much so reminded me of my daddy. He looked a lot like my daddy. And then after that, it was Earnhardt until the day he died.
yeah. That was crazy. It was. You saw it and you kind of thought, well, that can't be any big deal. But Daryl Waltrip's announcing, and Daryl Waltrip is worried. He really is. And then later I turned off the TV, and then I get a call from my dad later, and then I'm like, what?
The death of Earnhardt is one of those things where if you are from North Carolina, you remember where you were. Like, that's not a joke. So when it happened, my he was my boyfriend at the time. He's my husband now, but he was across the hall watching, and I was at my apartment, and my daddy called, and he was like in tears, like just freaking out, like Dale, Dale's been in a wreck. And I didn't have cable at my house, so I ran across the hallway, and I watched it from my boyfriend's apartment, and yeah, so I'll never forget that day. Like, where were you when Earnhardt died?
And then for the whole rest of that year, people would go silent on the third lap of every race. Yeah, it was, and nobody's really had the number three since either. I guess it's more the family. And Dale Jr. is retired now too. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's definitely evolved since then. I don't know if it's changed for the better or the worse. It's they've tried to make it more national, but
I would say for the worse. I
yeah,
think that some things just ought to be left alone, and I feel like it's kind of a slap in the face to close down our
yeah,
racetracks and to take something that we created and cultivated and turned into what it is, and change it and destroy it. But I feel like that's how most of us feel. Like, they took it and they destroyed it.
the guys make a lot more money now. And the most positive thing, and the one positive thing we can say, nobody has died in the series since.
That's true. But I wonder, like, what would Earnhardt have to say about that?
Well, they're all wearing that device now that they probably never would have started wearing it if it hadn't been Earnhardt. It just, because I mean, somebody like that goes, it just shakes everything up.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if it'd quite compare, to maybe quite compare to Princess Diana or John Lennon, but it's certainly comparable.
I would definitely compare him. I mean, as far as for my area, I
Yeah.
think that, I mean, still to this day, like I'll make a post on X and I'll say, raise hell, praise Dell. And that post will just blow up. 58,000 people or something crazy will hop on it. I mean, people still, even to this day, like we love us some Earnhardt.
Yeah, it's definitely, what do you think is going to happen? It seems like North Carolina's, you seem to worry about it losing. I guess there's somebody else we need to talk about with North Carolina. We got to talk about Andy.
Oh, Andy Griffith?
Yes, isn't he? Isn't he
Oh,
just? Isn't he just the quintessential North Carolina?
oh, I just love him. I mean, so I was born in the 80s, and even in the 80s, Andy
Yeah.
Griffith was still on TV. I feel like he's still on TV today, as far as being syndicated. And a lot of us grow up on Andy Griffith, and then he went on to do Matlock. And yeah, I mean, and he returned home. I love that. I love that he didn't just get famous and you know moved to Hollywood and never come back. He ended up making North Carolina his home, and he was here, when he died. And so I think that that's just perfect. North Carolina, if you're a North Carolinian, man, this place gets in your soul. Like it's home, and you return if you can.
Well, he also did a lot of I remember he did a lot of commercials for Ritz crackers too. But yeah, I pay too much attention to commercials. But yeah, 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 it's certainly. I think that really. Sometimes I think a lot of Americans wish we could go back to that simple town where everybody knew everybody, like Mayberry.
I
Would
mean,
you?
that's what I fight for every day.
Yeah.
I love that lifestyle, and I want it back really bad.
Yeah, there was this simple feeling of everybody trusting everybody. I don't know if I don't. Sometimes I wonder if we'll ever get back. Yeah, it's funny with Christmas coming up. I think that's another reason why It's a Wonderful Life is so popular
Yeah.
because it shows this America that doesn't exist anymore.
Well, I think that it depends on where you're looking at, and I, I get irritated here in North Carolina because you know I'm only 40, 43,
Oh, you don't look
and
43, just like Richard Petty. Yes.
well, thank you.
Yeah.
But I take a look at how much North Carolina has changed, and you have to remember, for the first 20 so years of my life, it didn't change at all. And then out of nowhere, we have this huge population boom, and it's just never stopped. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And but there are still places in North Carolina that embody all of those values and things that I grew up with. I mean, I think about Canton, and I lost my daddy fairly young in an accident, and my town came together. Like two different people came together. My daddy was disinterred, and it was legally done. It wasn't ethically done, but it was legally done. And I started reaching out, and I reached out to people in my hometown, and the people in my hometown made sure that my daddy's tombstone was a replica was put up. And I think about that and I go, man, like that North Carolina, care about your neighbor, like do the right thing, like it still exists. And that's worth protecting. And so I feel like when you look at the state and you see how much it's changed, like no wonder people like me want to hold on to things like, caring about your neighbor, and loving one another, and being there for one another, because you're right, it's starting to disappear. But if it will disappear if we don't talk about it. It will disappear if we don't say, "Hey, this isn't right." And, so I do my best.
You said your dad was disinterred, so what they took his body out of the ground or what? I don't quite understand.
Yeah, my daddy's remains were removed from the cemetery. He had been cremated, and his ashes and his tombstone were taken. And, anywhere else in the world, a few phone calls, people probably would have been like, eh, but people I had a attorney look into it for me to see if there was anything that could be done about it. Um, I called, a cemetery, the people who ran the cemetery, and I explained to them what happened, and we had it all set up that I was going to buy a new tombstone, and they ended up like covering it. They donated it. The attorney who looked into it did it for free. Like they really just did this because I'm from Canton, and they were looking out for me, and I think that that's just the most beautiful thing in the world. Like you don't run into that all the time. These people, spent their time, and in some cases, spent their money to make sure that the right thing was done, and to me, that's just incredible. And so that is the spirit of North Carolina that I fight for all the time because, like you said, that simple way of life seems to be disappearing, but then you run into little things like that, and it reminds you it's still there. We're just not fighting for it. We're allowing all of this change. And so if we would speak up more, and if we would, hold the door open for people, and we would, pull over for that funeral, and we would bring the casserole to a funeral, and if we would just embody all of those things that we were raised to do, then we could bring that back.
Yeah, is there anybody else famous from North Carolina that we should know about that we
You
haven't
left off
mentioned?
you left off Michael Jordan.
Oh yes, of course.
Yeah, Michael Jordan's
I
from
wasn't sure.
here.
I knew he played at UNC, but I wasn't sure. But
Yeah.
obviously, yeah.
So he was born in New York, I want to say, but his daddy had roots here in North Carolina. Randy Travis is from Marshville, North Carolina. Um, let's see. Oh,
Anybody
I'm
else?
missing a big one. I'm
Anybody
missing a
else
big one.
famous in history? Too. That's
Um, Charlie Daniels. There we go. That was going to drive me
yes.
crazy. Charlie Daniels is from North Carolina, and Woolly Swamp is a place that really exists in Bladen County. Um, Yeah, I mean, there have been some really fascinating characters from here in North Carolina.
So why is it the devil went down to Georgia and not the devil went down to North Carolina?
Oh, because the
Maybe that's just
North
too
Car
long.
North Carolina is the Bible Belt. He would never make it here.
Yeah, but that's a great song.
I tell people all the time, the devil went to Georgia, but Johnny, he was a North Carolinian.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, yeah, it's certainly great. You ever go to Mayberry Days?
I haven't. I did actually make it up to Mount Airy for the first
Yeah,
time over the summer. I want to say it was in July. Absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to go back and actually fully explore the town. They have this beautiful mural of Andy Griffith, like showing him at different phases throughout his life, which is just so sweet. So I fully intend on going back and doing the whole thing, like staying overnight and checking out all of the Andy Griffith themed stuff while I'm there.
yeah, he must have been a really nice guy too, because it seems like because you never hear anything bad about him. I don't even know if you have stars like that anymore.
I don't know. I don't know. I know that we used to, and hopefully we bring it back. I feel like most stars today focus on, cramming their ideology down your throat, and they want to fuss and fight. And I feel like we need to bring back, the stars of the 50s who just wanted to make movies or make their music or write their books or whatever it was, and they wanted to appeal to everybody. And I feel like we don't have that anymore. And I feel like art has suffered because of it.
Yeah, well, I think one thing too is I think Ron Howard's the only person from Andy Griffith's show that's still alive at this point. I mean, Opie,
That,
that's it.
yeah, that's probably true.
I mean, Don Knotts isn't certainly. Of course, the other thing. What do you think attracted all the high tech stuff to the, they call it the research triangle? Do you think it's just because there's so many colleges there, or what?
I'm the wrong person to ask. I'm not the biggest fan of it. When I was growing up, when you traveled out towards Raleigh, you were going to run through a bunch of tobacco fields, and it was going to be tobacco field after tobacco field after tobacco field, all the way till you reach the city, right? And so that's no longer the case. Now, urban sprawl is taking over everything. The tobacco barns are being torn down, the tobacco fields are disappearing, and instead it's being replaced with something that feels very California esque. And so I'm not the biggest fan of it.
Yeah,
um, I understand that it does help our economy some, but my question here is okay, it's helping the economy, but how much is it helping regular everyday North Carolinians? It's not like very many of those are getting those jobs to begin with. I would much rather see jobs come in that are hiring, our people and not bringing in people from other countries or from other states, because that really just erodes our culture. So I would like to see, our politicians try to come up with a better way to attract jobs to actually hire native North Carolinians.
that is one thing. These governors and people will say, "Oh, we're getting so and so to come here, and they're going to bring all these jobs." And what happens is they just bring all their people with them. They
Yep.
might that now. Granted, there's probably a few people who don't want to move, and they don't move, but yeah, it mostly is just a case of them bringing their people with them, and they don't hire the locals. One of the worst examples I can think of is this close to where I live. This organization called moved from. I think they moved their offices from St. Clairsville, Ohio, to Wheeling, West Virginia, which are 8 miles apart. And they were like saying, "We're bringing 150 jobs to West Virginia." You're moving your offices 8 miles. All those people are going to move with you.
Yep. To me, it's a lie, right?
Yeah.
They're telling you a lie. They're like, "Oh, we're going to create this many jobs." No, you're not. What you're really going to do is you're going to move in, you're going to import all of these people, and what's going to happen as a result is the accents that are so special and beautiful here in North Carolina are going to disappear. There's going to be more people here who don't appreciate North Carolina style barbecue. There's going to be more people here that don't understand the value of longleaf pine savannas and don't understand, the beauty of our waterfalls and why certain things need to be protected, and it's just going to make things worse. And I feel like it makes things worse on those of us whose, families have been here for generations, but trying to get a politician to understand that is like pulling teeth, right?
Yeah, I don't know what they understand. And I do, when we have this society where everybody just moves all the time, we lose all our roots. We're not close to our families. It just changes the character of everything. I
What's really scary about it is, and something that I found most people don't really seem to understand, is culture unifies, right? And it unifies and builds bridges even across race differences, gender differences, sexuality, whatever it may be, because it gives you something that you have in common, and not a small something, a huge something. So you're talking about, your culture embraces literally everything. It's your landscapes, it's your plant life, it's your wildlife, it's your accents, it's your food, it's your religion, it's your values, it's your traditions, everything. It's literally everything. And so when your culture starts to fail, and we're not talking about pop culture, we're talking about real culture, your cultural heritage. When that begins to fail, then what connects you to one another? What makes you feel the need to protect one another? And, you know, you do you see what I'm saying? When that fails, your society is weaker. And at that point, you have to start worrying about, if your society is weak, what does that mean could potentially happen? Your society could fall. So it's really important that we protect our cultural heritage. And sadly, most people don't understand that. And so I really hope that, if there are listeners out there who hear this, I hope that you start taking a look around and, paying attention. Like, even the tiniest little tradition that you learn from your grandparents, that's something that very likely your neighbor or, somebody three houses over, they probably learned from their grandparents too. And that's something that you have in common. And we should want to protect the things that we have in common.
Yeah, what other places? What are some places people? How did Charlotte end up as the capital, or end up as or how did Charlotte end up becoming such a center for business? By the way, what's your theories on that?
Well, it's not really a theory. It's the North Carolina Gold Rush. North Carolina was the
There was a
site of
gold
the
rush. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. North Carolina was the site of the very first gold rush, and you can learn more about that at the Gold Mine. It's not very far from Charlotte. It is a very interesting, great story about a German family who one of the sons found a giant gold uh, nugget in the creek near his house. Sadly, they got ripped off on that one, but they did end up creating a gold mine, and that gold mine produced lots and lots of gold. And of course, because there was a lot of gold mining going on in North Carolina, we had to have banking here, right? And so right around then is when you started. I believe there was a North Carolina Mint in the Charlotte area. Um, and then it was just a natural progression for, the banking centers and things to start moving into Charlotte. And it really just ties back to early North Carolina history.
Yeah, that's true. It's just because you have this one city here, but then you have the other cities over there where like Winston Salem and Greensboro and those other towns. It's is there any other secrets and any other secret places that people might want to reveal, or maybe you don't want to reveal them?
I never tell people my favorite town in North Carolina because I don't want people to flood it.
I get it. Yeah.
Um, and there are places that other people get upset with me about talking about, but I would definitely say so. If you come to the state of North Carolina, one of the things that you need to do is, especially during the summer, you need to go to Britt's Donuts, and that is on the Carolina Beach boardwalk. This place has been churning out donuts for generations. And my family, literally, I want to say, including my kids, we have been going to the same donut shop for 4 generations. And it's some of the best donuts you will ever eat. It is worth traveling from other states to go there to see it. And so not only will you be doing that, but then you're going to be in Pleasure Island. That is literally the place where beach music was created. It is the place that you need to go and you need to do a little shagging in the sand. They actually have I want to say that there's a shagging festival down there
A
still to this
shagging
day.
festival. Okay.
Yeah.
Shag
Um, and
dancing. Okay.
and then there is let's see. Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff down there. There's the
Yeah.
Carolina Beach State Park. Like, it's just a great, phenomenal area. Fort Fisher is down there. Fort Fisher is probably one of my favorite Civil War sites in the entire state. It is beautiful, white, right on the water, and then right across the road, there's some of the most beautiful strand of beach in North Carolina.
Yeah, I can't really think of that many battles that were fought in the Civil War in North Carolina. I mean, so many in Virginia, but yeah, I assume there were some there though. But
Yeah, there were definitely a few here, but to me, that one is the just there aren't very many on
Fort
the
Fisher, yeah,
water, and this one is just it's breathtaking. I mean, people get married there. We're talking about a Civil
yeah,
War site
oh yeah,
where
oh, yeah,
people get married
that's great.
because
Yeah,
it's really just absolutely gorgeous. I definitely recommend that people go to Harker's Island. You're going to want to go over to Cape Lookout, and you're going to want to check out the wild horses that live out there. Of course, the Great Smoky Mountains. Definitely go see the elk. The best time to see them is during mating season, and so that's going to be in the fall. Do be a little more careful because they are a little more aggressive during that time. But seeing elk, in east of the Mississippi is just absolutely amazing, especially when you're talking about down south. And so everybody should go do that. The Biltmore House is America's castle, y'all. You need to go see it if you've never done it before. And
yeah.
then there's Seagrove. Seagrove is literally a little village of pottery families, and some of the most famous pottery families that have ever existed in America live there. I'm actually related to some of those, so you guys need to go check that out. I mean, North Carolina is really just a treasure trove full of amazing history and different things and little quirks. And so I feel like everybody should get to know the entire state because it's really cool.
Yeah, I've been around North Carolina a lot. It's a yeah, my family used to go to Myrtle Beach, although that's in South Carolina, but it's not too far away. But we went through North Carolina on the way, so we certainly saw plenty of different places. It's
Did you stop at Calabash?
We didn't never went to Calabash actually.
That's so sad. So Myrtle Beach is a big deal to North Carolinians. It's where we all used to go for spring break and for
Yeah,
family vacations and that kind of thing. And on the way back, our families would always stop by Calabash. And Calabash has a really interesting history. There was these three families who started fish camps right there on the waterway in Calabash. And so whenever the shrimping boats and they would come in, the fishing boats would come in, these families would be set up literally cooking out in the open, and they would sell their food to the fishermen as they got off the boats. And eventually that led to restaurants, and some of the best
yeah,
seafood that you can eat in the entire world can be found at Calabash.
yeah. And I also did manage to go to the Richard Petty Museum once, and I also went to the NASCAR Hall of Fame in Charlotte. So, and the Richard Petty Museum, they actually still work on things there. He might actually show up.
That's awesome. He is like my unicorn. If he is watching this, or anyone who knows him is watching this, please tell Richard Petty that Cassie Clark wants to interview him so bad she can't stand it.
I can understand. It's well, and he might very well come on if he. Who knows? But I won't speak for him. But it's I guess talking about music, I wondered if anybody's ever changed California girls to Carolina girls.
Well, we do have a song about Carolina
Yes.
girls. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it'd be very easy to
It's a
replace one of
shagging
these.
song.
Wow, yeah, I guess it's still that big. Yeah, because I knew there was that movie called Shag too back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it's just a type of dancing. Yeah,
Yep.
well, this has been a great talk. I've enjoyed it. I knew I'd enjoy having you on here though. So
Well,
yeah,
thank you so much for having me.
yes, well, please, where can we find you out there?
Yeah, so the website is wherethedogwoodblooms.com. And so I have a blog over there. And then if you're looking for the podcast, you can find me on Spotify, YouTube, anywhere that you really listen to podcasts. And then on social media, I really prefer X. And so my name over there is at Dogwood Blooms. And I talk about all things North Carolina all the time.
Are there a lot of dogwoods there? I should ask, but
Yeah, the dogwood flower is the North Carolina state flower.
okay. Okay, so please like the show, subscribe to the channel, go like my show on various podcast sites. Please buy my novel Escape from the Village. Check out my Substack and you can give me money at Buy Me a Coffee. Thank you, Cassie Clark. I'm Chris Baker. We're out. Buy my novel Escape from the Village from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to the Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Support the forum. Go to buymeacoffee.com/fountainheadforum. Thank you.